Welcome to our newscast. I'm Daniel Che. Let us begin with our headlines. Meeting with our economy ministers, President Hwang KyoAhn highlights reforms and restructuring as the keys to economic revival and job creation. The government also announces a $17 billion budget supplement to accompany those efforts. With both the EU and Britain saying that Brexit is happening and that all that matters is bringing about a swift transition, the pound plummets and global stocks slide. China ups the pressure on Pyongyang by submitting its sanctions implementation plan to the UN Security Council. This is Beijing's fastest response yet on the sanctions on its longtime ally. Restructuring and reforms are the answer to countering the challenges facing the Korean economy. That's how President Hwang KyoAhn assessed the current situation at a meeting with economy ministers on Tuesday. Song Ji-sun starts us off with a policy set for the second half of the year.
Setting the economic policy direction for the second half of this year, President Park Geun-hye said reforms and restructuring stand at the center when it comes to improving Korea's economic fundamentals and creating more jobs. The government announced a set of measures to boost the economy, including its proposal for a multi-billion-dollar budget supplement. President Park said the special measures were inevitable, given the seriousness of the current situation, including Britain's exit from the European Union and the massive layoffs in the forecast following the government's corporate restructuring drive.
추경과 함께 소비, 투자, 수출의 활력 제고 노력도 강화해야 합니다. 이를 위해서는 발상을 전환해서 경제 활력 제고를 위한 새로운 아이디어들을 많이 만들어내야 하겠습니다.
President Park pointed to the Korean wave as creating momentum to boost exports and the Creative Economy initiative of nurturing startups as a platform of creating jobs. She said the restructuring is not an option but a must to improve Korea's economic fundamentals, noting the need to foster new industries to create future growth engines and pledged further deregulation moves to boost private investment.
구조조정으로 우리 경제의 환부를 도려낸 자리에 생기는 공백은 신산업의 선제적 육성으로 메꿔 나가야 합니다.
Stressing that the new stimulus package is aimed at creating jobs for those who might lose them through the restructuring process, President Park called on the parliament to promptly pass the related bills after they're proposed so the policies can immediately take effect to improve people's livelihoods. Song Ji-sun, Arirang News.
The Korean government has laid out its economic policy for the second half of the year that includes an $8.5 billion budget supplement. Kim Min-ji introduces us to the plan aimed at creating new jobs in the face of a major overhaul of struggling industries, including the shipping and shipbuilding sectors.
The Korean government has vowed to introduce a 20 trillion won or roughly $17 billion stimulus package to tackle external uncertainties and boost job creation. Laying out the direction of its economic policy for the second half of the year, the Finance Ministry said Tuesday a supplementary budget of roughly $8.5 billion will be part of the stimulus measure. The extra budget will draw primarily from excess tax revenue, while the rest of the stimulus package will come in the form of increased investment by state-run companies and other means of spending.
By using all possible means, including a supplementary budget, we will respond swiftly to deteriorating short-term uncertainties and get one step ahead in preparing for mid-term risks such as the Brexit. We need an extra budget specifically designed to minimize the impact from external challenges and corporate restructuring.
The financial support comes as the Korean government lowers its economic growth forecast for 2016 to 2.8%, down from an earlier forecast of 3.1%. If the projections are correct, it will mean growth in the 2% range for a second straight year. Korea's exports have fallen every month since last year due to slowing global demand, and the country will also start feeling the full-blown impact from the government's corporate restructuring drive, which is expected to take a toll on employment and production. On top of that, although the fallout from Brexit is not expected to have a direct impact on the Korean economy, indirect effects cannot be ruled out if it brings prolonged market volatility and weighs on the global economy. The government expects a supplementary budget to help the country achieve its growth target. But given the current conditions, experts say the impact from the stimulus measures will be limited.
The size of the budget isn't small, but when it comes to effectiveness, it's not likely to pull the growth rate up to 0.3 percentage points as the government hopes. Aside from the unexpected situation in Europe, the global economy is still reeling from China's slowing growth and a possible U.S. rate hike.
The government plans to present the proposal to the National Assembly as fast as possible to cushion the negative impact from uncertainties at home and abroad. Kim Min-ji, Arirang News.
The uncertainty over Britain's future in the wake of the EU referendum has been wreaking havoc on global financial markets, with the pound slumping and global stocks tanking. There's a similar trend in Korea, except we saw a slight recovery on Tuesday. Lee Min-young looks beyond the numbers.
Most Asian stock benchmarks started low on Tuesday amid concerns over Brexit and market fallouts, but mostly saw a slight rebound at the close. In Korea, the benchmark Kospi and the tech-heavy Kosdaq both closed 0.49% and 1.72% higher respectively, after opening around 1% lower on Tuesday morning. The foreign exchange market also remains volatile. The Korean won continued to weaken against the greenback, trading at 1,171 won, falling 11 won from Monday's close, as investors flee to safer assets. Japan's benchmark Nikkei 225 ended 0.1% higher at 15,323.14 after falling to as low as 14,987.79 earlier. The Shanghai Composite Index in mainland China also saw a recovery, edging up 0.39% at 2,907.07. U.S. stock markets dropped for the second straight day on Monday. The Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 fell 1.5% and 1.8% respectively. The tech-heavy Nasdaq slumped 2.4%. Analysts say the market will remain volatile for some time as uncertainties linger over Britain's decision.
It's uncharted territory. We don't know what the effects are going to be in Europe and globally, so investors automatically just feel somewhat reserved from being in the market.
European shares rose for the first time in 3 days, attempting a recovery after Britain's vote to leave the European Union. London's FTSE index opened 1.6% higher, while French CAC was up over 2% and the German DAX rose 1.8% in the first few minutes of trade. Meanwhile, the UK was hit hard as S&P Global Ratings lowered its credit rating for Britain to AA from AAA, saying the outlook on the long-term rating is negative, adding to investors' anxiety. Another concern is the plunging British pound, currently floundering at a 31-year low against the dollar on Monday. Lee Min-young, Arirang News.
Turning to global efforts to curb North Korea's nuclear ambition, China submits its plans on how to implement sanctions on North Korea to the UN Security Council. The latest addition, coming from the regime's closest ally, raises the number of UN members who have done so to 35. Hwang KyoAhn has the details.
China has shown its commitment to tightening the screw on North Korea. A South Korean government official says Beijing recently submitted its sanctions implementation plan to the UN Security Council. Although South Korea's foreign ministry says it has known that China handed the report in on the 20th of this month, it did not clearly state when Seoul was informed, nor did it elaborate on the contents of the report.
Before the relevant country or the UN Secretariat publishes a member's implementation report, fundamentally, it's not for a third country to confirm it or mention it in public.
China seems to be taking more responsibility than in the past for punishing its ally for flouting its international obligations. It took 7 months for China to submit its plans for a resolution on North Korea in 2013. This time it was late by less than a month. The UN had called for the reports within 90 days of the adoption of Resolution 2270, which was imposed in March after North Korea's fourth nuclear test in January. So far, 35 out of more than 190 nations have submitted their reports. The reports will be translated into the UN's 6 official languages and posted on the UN homepage unless members specifically request otherwise. In line with this, South Korea, the U.S., and Japan will host an international meeting on the challenges ahead regarding Resolution 2270 at the UN headquarters in New York on Thursday. Seoul's foreign ministry says the meeting will be a way to discuss making the sanctions more effective, as well as analyzing each by field, be it travel bans, asset freezes, or blocking weapons of mass destruction development. With the UN ambassadors of each country, UN officials, scholars, and business people all expected to participate, as one diplomatic source says, it won't be a small meeting. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
North Korea once again attempts to bring about dialogue with the South. Seoul isn't buying it, though, and says it won't engage in dialogue with Pyongyang until it takes some sincere steps toward denuclearization. Connie Kim fills us in on the regime's failed charm tactic.
South Korea has dismissed the North Korean proposal for an inter-Korean meeting, calling it meaningless reunification propaganda. Seoul's unification ministry said in a statement Tuesday, the proposal is a repeat of the regime's previous tactics and called on Pyongyang to show a willingness to denuclearize. The statement also criticized North Korea for a lack of sincerity, pointing to Pyongyang's mention of peace and reunification, even as it forges ahead with its nuclear provocations. North Korea on Monday proposed holding a meeting in Pyongyang or Kaesang around Liberation Day in August to mark the 71st anniversary of Korea's independence from Japanese colonial rule. The North also proposed to hold a working-level meeting next month and said it would send a public letter to some 100 high-level South Korean government officials. Although Seoul has shut down all dialogue and exchanges with Pyongyang in the wake of North Korea's nuclear test and long-range ballistic missile launch early this year, most experts say the North's intent is to create divisions in the South.
The North is seeking to stoke conflict among South Koreans by showing that Pyongyang is actively willing to speak with Seoul.
North Korea watchers in Seoul say Pyongyang will continue to make similar proposals in order to throw the ball into South Korea's court as the pressure from the international sanctions on the regime intensifies. Connie Kim, Arirang News.
The United States says North Korea might have taken a big step toward mastering the technology required to develop operational intercontinental ballistic missiles. Facing the growing threat, the U.S., South Korea, and Japan are holding a drill to track future missile fired by the North. Kim Hyun-bin has the latest.
The Pentagon has confirmed that the U.S. tracked the flight path of North Korea's most recent Musudan missile launch, saying it went into space before re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. The statement by the Pentagon spokesperson is the first time the U.S. has confirmed the performance of a North Korean missile launch. Pyongyang had earlier claimed the missile had entered orbit and come back down, boasting that it had perfected the complex technology required to pull off such a feat. Mastering a re-entry technology is one of the keys to developing an intercontinental ballistic missile, as it needs to endure extreme heat when re-entering the Earth's atmosphere. Last week's Musudan test was the regime's sixth since April. The previous 5 had ended in failure, exploding in mid-air soon after launch. With the rise in missile threats posed by North Korea, South Korea, Japan, and the U.S. are scheduled to hold a trilateral missile defense exercise this week in Hawaii. The exercise will focus on sharing information and tracking the enemy's missile trajectory. All 3 countries have deployed Aegis destroyers for the drill. Kim Hyun-bin, Arirang News.
South Korean Prime Minister Hwang KyoAhn is set to meet with his Chinese counterpart Premier Li Keqiang on Tuesday. Hwang will seek Beijing's cooperation in tackling illegal fishing. The South Korean military has been conducting a crackdown in the Hangang River estuary to expel all Chinese boats fishing illegally in South Korean waters. The two will also touch on economic issues, including their free trade agreement and the impact of Brexit, as well as North Korea's latest ballistic missile launch and cultural exchanges. Hwang will meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping on Wednesday. South Korea is ranked 14th on a survey measuring mobile internet access in 134 countries. According to the Mobile Connectivity Index released Tuesday by the GSMA, South Korea scored 80.7 out of 100. Australia was number 1 with 84.7 points, while Singapore ranked just above Korea in 13th place, making it the highest-ranking Asian country on that list. The index takes 4 factors into account: infrastructure, affordability, consumer readiness, and content. South Korea topped the rankings for its mobile infrastructure and came in 8th for consumer affordability, but earned lower scores for consumer readiness and content. The GSMA is an international trade association that represents over 250 companies in the global telecommunications sector. These are the stories we're following at this hour. For more updates, do tune in at 10 p.m. Korea time for Moon Gun-young's News Center. From all of us here at Arirang News, thank you for watching.